Now I'm very proud to introduce our first keynote speech. So please, Maija Kāle, come here. And Maija Kāle is Latvian researcher, recently received a PhD from the Faculty of Computer Science at the University of Latvia, and her main research interests are in the area of food computing, which includes the analysis of food systems, big data related to food, and the language used to describe food. Maija's work aims to improve the understanding of food-related data and its impact on society, both from an environmental and personal health perspective. Maija, I hope that you will advertise our program a little bit more in telling that you also have been a student in this program, and this is one of the reasons I'm especially proud to introduce Maija today, but also, first of all, because her subject is so exciting. And please don't be afraid to ask questions. People who are here today in person will be able to ask their questions aloud. If you are attending on Zoom platform, please write your questions in Zoom. We will read them aloud, and so let's have a really productive discussion after the talk. And with that, welcome.
Thank you, Anda. And as Anda already mentioned, I joined this summer school at the beginning of my studies, and it was such a luck for me to do that, because not only I learned a lot about programming, but also I got a really great network. So I had co-authors that I found in this group of people. So I really also wish all of you to network, to find like-minded researchers and to collaborate, because whenever we do something, whenever we do research, each of us, we have different skills, and it's very good to combine skills. And this is this interdisciplinarity or cross-sectorality that everybody is talking about, but that is so difficult to achieve. But this is a place where you can do that. And I'm also very happy for this invitation to present my research that lasted approximately 5 years. And my background is actually, I studied first economics and business administration at the Stockholm School of Economics in Riga. And then I did a Master of Arts in Social Sciences in Albert Ludwigs University and KwaZulu-Natal University, South Africa. There was also India, but we didn't get the degree from there, but still, that was social science, is very kind of geographically dispersed, and also the discourse is really different. It was very exciting. At those times, globalization was something new. Everybody talked about globalization, not about ChatGPT as nowadays. So this has changed, the topics have changed. And then eventually, somehow, partly, just unexpectedly, partly because I thought, what would be the topic I would really like to read about in the evenings after work, because I combined my PhD with my daily work. And I thought, well, I really like to read about food. So I have to study something about food, because it's so exciting, it's interesting, it's such a broad topic. And then I studied at the Faculty of Computing at the University of Latvia, and I can proudly say that I'm a founder of food computing there, right? So we will get into this topic more as I present. But today's agenda, as the focus was on the language, so first I will start introducing the language of food kind of issues, and then we will look into this food computing specifics and the future of food computing. So let's first talk about food, or the language of food. First of all, people do talk about food a lot. Food is one of the most discussed topics on social networks. You would think, well, that's a place where the politics is discussed. Maybe, but food is always top there. The people just like to discuss food. Also, with our cameras, we have this ability to make lots of photos. Storage is cheap. So it means we make photos of everything, and food is such a daily kind of, it appears now and then more frequent than the rain, right? So you just make photos of food, or many people do that. And then there is also, if you imagine a couple of years ago, there was no such things as a TV series of street food or celebrity chefs. This is also somewhat a recent phenomena. So food is a topic that sells, it's a topic that interests everyone, and it's also a topic that creates lots of discussion nowadays. We will discuss it more later, but let me start first. Then I was trying to structure somehow what is this that people talk about food, and I managed to structure into three sections. So it's multisensory experiences, health versus pleasure, and global challenges. This is not the ranking of importance, it's just how we will dive into this topic. So let's start about multisensory experiences. That's somewhat a very basic that we can talk about whatsoever, whatever happens in our life. So these are impressions that are built, that build our perception of the external world. And this is how we see, hear, feel, taste, or smell the world. So this is very basic, how we actually understand what the world is about or how we can experience it. And here I would like to mention the authors Carlos Velasco and Mariana Obrist and their book Multisensory Experiences, where they specifically explore this food-related multisensory experiences. And of course, eating and drinking is one of the most multisensory events in our everyday life. And it's not just the food or drink, but it's all the ambience. And for example, Professor Charles Spence always emphasizes that whatever we enjoy about food, what really makes it is all the ambience around us. But the ambience around us is also made of these multisensory experiences. So it's lighting, it's sound, it's smell, it's everything. And it's a big marketing science behind that, how the restaurants or the food sellers work with taking all these kind of knowledge into account. Right, and when we look at the food, then of course we also see that it's not just the eating act itself, but it's also how you grow the food, how you prepare, how you share. So it's very wide field where we can really dive into very deeply. But just to illustrate what we have done with my co-author Mattis, not the one I met in this summer school, but still we met on Twitter. So I was sharing what I was doing in my research, and then he told, well, we should meet actually. And then we started to collaborate, Mattis Richters. So what we did in our work is that we looked what are these multisensory experiences that people talk about on social network Twitter. And Mattis has done a really amazing work. He has gathered a 10 years old like language corpus of food, so we can really analyze everything that the Latvians talk about, or in Latvian language is being talked about food, right? So what we did, we wanted to look, so what are these multisensory experiences that the people talk in Latvian language in Twitter? And we found out, so to say, the densest areas, that people talk more about color, and I will tell more about this later, and they talk less about smell, and the sparsest areas as the smell. So the densest areas, that's always the color, and no, not surprisingly, because we have black tea, we have green tea, right, black coffee, so it's this color is somewhat very much used in describing food. One more thing that was quite unique in this work that we did when analyzing this Twitter data is this temporality. So what we could see is on what time of the day people talk about what aspect. And then some funny findings is that we could deduce that coffee and chocolate are increasingly collocated with tasty closer to the weekend. So closer to the weekend, coffee and chocolate gets tastier. Well, Monday mornings are for salad. Not sure if you already tweeted that you had a salad for breakfast, but probably many people did it. And meat mentions appear largely in the afternoon throughout the entire week, except Sundays. Interesting, so Sundays, no meat. And this all we could really trace through the data just by analyzing this language data that we have, because we have the tweet time, we have the tweet analytics, and this is what we can get out of it. And this is the first such type of study, because not that many computer scientists actually thought that it's interesting to dig into the topic of food that deeply. If we continue further, that I already mentioned that there are some areas of multisensory experiences that we talk a lot about, and then there are some that we don't talk a lot. And then I wanted to refer to the research conducted by Asifa Majid. And what she does, she researches that how in different languages how they differ in terms of what we can express. And Asifa has done really amazing research. You can Google more that it's very Western-centric aspect that we are not able to talk about smell. Well, we can say it's a good smell, it's a bad smell, but that's pretty much it. Like we have white and black, only two colors. But there are tribes or nations or where you can actually be very gradual and very specific about smell or these olfactory experiences. And this is something as we as the researchers have to take into account, so we cannot make somewhat generalistic judgments that all the humans are not talking or are not being able to be very specific about smell in their language kind of expressions, because there are places in the world where you can find people who can express very exact kind of experiences about olfactory and so on. So basically what we, just to illustrate, if you compare with the previous graph, you could see lots of very dense area or lots of numbers of these colors and food collocations. But here, if you look at how the smell is reflected in Latvian Twitter, then you can see that pleasant smell and bad smell, the frequency is very, very low, right? The top is like 60 people at some point said that, well, it smells like gingerbread. Well, obviously, that's a seasonal kind of peak, and it's not just going. It's just decreasing because this is the time when the Instagram was introduced, and then many people went to Instagram and were like posting posts about pleasant gingerbreads together with pictures. So anyhow, this is seasonal. So seasonally, maybe we can say something about smell, but that remains it. And then the bad smell events are even less. Well, I remember that there was one tweet that people didn't like, that other people are coming to theaters after eating garlic or something like that, but it's very, very little. So all in all, people don't talk about smell on Twitter, right? So yeah, as Asifa, she discovered that abstract odor terms are common among people on the Malay Peninsula. And also they found other communities. And what is also interesting that whenever we consider these aspects of smell or the odor or olfactory experiences, we also have to always keep in mind that it might mean also that the metaphors differ. So for example, here it was interesting that in one culture sounds were thin or thick rather than high or low. So this is another kind of thing to take into account whenever we analyze something. So about the metaphors we will talk a bit more later. Another very sparse area of discussion is sound. They also don't talk that much about audial experiences of food, but they turn out to be very, very important. As the Professor Spence, he has actually got some kind of prize for his research because he says that sound in food is a really powerful kind of aspect. And how do you think why? Why would be sound a powerful aspect? Why sound matters when it's like well, it's a food, why should I care about sound? Can you think?
It stimulates your imagination about what the food might taste like, for example.
Stimulates the imagination. Good guess. Any other guess?
It signals whether the food is okay or not. If it's an apple or watermelon,
Yeah.
cut it, you see the specific sound of purely normal.
Very interesting. So you remember that you were knocking the watermelon, and then you can say, well, this is a good or bad fruit. Very good, very good. Yes, more ideas?
Annoying when someone chews loudly.
This annoying of chewing, yes, very good. Well, all in all, our brain, when it comes to food, is mostly focused on food security, because we don't want to get food poison. So a crunchy anything means the food is fresh. It's a fresh fruit, fresh cabbage, it crunches, it means we will not get food poisoned, we will survive. So the brain works that way. And still, you can kind of amplify this audial experience and even enjoy more. That means like, it's really fresh. So what Professor Spence did, they made some audio specific like amplifiers. So when you would eat potato chips, you were wearing headphones, and then in the headphones you even have more, they're more crispy, more crunchy, and it's like, wow, amazing chips. There are so much also in the language how we can express this crispiness. So it's munch, crunch, crackle, chomp, sizzle, and many other. And still, they were not probably too much represented in this data corpus. But this is an important aspect to look at, and you see that also in the advertising. You see that lots of people are advertising crunchiness, and also what Spence talked about is that also no wonder that when you open the chips pack, it also makes the sound. It's like, wow, sound of celebration. So all this also packaging is designed so that you have this audial experience when you consume this particular food. So one more thing to think about, and how it's reflected in the language. So with this, we have come to another kind of term, which is called gastrophysics. This is this cross-sectoral scientific discipline where you look at everything else that matters, or how these experiences are built around our consuming food. And there are so many interesting kind of things. As along the way, also Spence has found that the strawberry favorite mousse tastes 10% sweeter when served from a white container rather than a black one. So if your dessert is on white dish plate, then it tastes more sweet. Or coffee tastes nearly twice as intense, but only 2/3 as sweet when it's drunk from a white mug. So if you drink coffee from white mug, you think it's stronger than if you drink it from black mug or any other color mug. And if the packaging of food, in this case particularly the yogurt, is heavy, then just by increasing the weight of packaging, you create a sense that the food that the person is eating is filling. So our brain can be tricked in different ways, and it's good to know how. And also there are many, many other aspects. For example, for the same reason that we try to focus on the brain mainly focuses on food security, also then you pay so much more attention to the first bite. And this could also help to reduce sugar, because if you just pay attention to the first bite, then maybe the middle of the bar can be less sweet, because actually you wouldn't really that much pay attention to that anymore. And this is good to know. So, right. Also, as I mentioned, and here I also will probably end, this particular session of multisensory experiences, somewhat under-researched field is this intersection between analog and digital lives, because it's very difficult to research it or somehow to really draw some kind of conclusions, cause and consequence. But there are some interesting discoveries when it comes to food. For example, and they are quite controversial. Some people say that, or some researchers have found out that the more you look at the pictures of food, the more you are inclined to buy this food. But then there is also some kind of research which says that, well, actually if you look too much on these food pictures, then you feel like you have already eaten without actually having that food. So you have this sense of satiety. So there is lots of things to dig into this intersection between analog and digital lives, how they impact us, or how they set the trends, or how people in general outplay the behavior that they see on social media. This will definitely be also the future kind of area of research, also with all the ChatGPT, all this different kind of new digital content, like how will it interact with our analog lives. Okay, so once more about multisensory experiences. What is amazing with social media analysis, that from static analysis, where people sometimes just fill surveys or questionnaires or something like that, we can go to this dynamic timeline of researching. So with the social media, we have not just the content, but also time. And that is very important, because it turns out that we are still bound to this daily rhythm of a day, but also we are stick to this working week, and this all kind of changes our behavior. We can capture the whole process of food consumption, including everything else that matters. And then we have to keep in mind the cultural context. It's easy to talk about color, difficult about smells, but that's in particular cultures only. And then interaction with technologies. And this interaction with technologies will just grow, increase, and make things more complicated and also more interesting. So, the second kind of topic when people talk about food is something like probably personal. It's like health versus pleasure. And how do you think, well, do people, when they talk about food, do they speak more about the health or about pleasure or enjoyment in social media, if you have noticed some tweets or you have tweeted yourself? 50-50. 50-50. Okay, good.
I would say pleasure.
Pleasure. You would say pleasure.
Health is more trending.
You would say health.
Instagram, combined with visuals.
Okay, good. We will see. We don't know. We have done some research together with Ebenezer, and that's the researcher I met in this summer school. So with Eben, we started to think, can we deduct something about healthiness or tastiness about food from the various data? We first analyzed recipes, but then we also analyzed Twitter English tweets. And we wanted to look how people tweet when they tweet about healthy food using the hashtag healthy or healthy food. And we found out that when people talk about healthy food, they would emphasize more this rational and pragmatic kind of things, like it's easy to make, it's good for your body, like Anda mentioned her fitness app, something like if you come back, it's easier, or it's easy to make, just try. You know, this kind of be rational human being and make a healthy food for yourself. Not that much mentions of taste, but I agree, it might be changing, and that would be interesting to explore. But all in all, we will still come to the question of taste. What is important to know here is research by Robert May. He mentioned that unhealthy, tasty intuition. So if you see or taste unhealthy food, you give it already, it's like in your brain, it signalizes that it must be tasty, because unhealthy is tasty. And it works also vice versa, that probably if it's healthy, then probably it's not that tasty. And this we can also somewhat resonate into these food descriptions or language of food, how healthy food is described, so more pragmatic, and unhealthy food is way more eloquently and sensually described. And here, this is quite a good book to read, to know more about this. There is an overarching analysis of very many menus, food reviews, and historical perspectives of food descriptions and dish names, how it all kind of developed. And some interesting things is that what Dan Juravsky is looking at, also kind of our human nature. What do we describe, how we describe. And in general, we have vocabulary more to describe negative food experiences than positive food experiences. And why do we have it? Again, the same principle. We want not to get food poisoned, so we are more specific about specific negative experiences rather than positive. Because if the things work, we survive, the taste is great. But if something didn't work, we have more vocabulary to describe it, why it didn't work. What is also interesting that people would never really before 1800s talk that they love food. The word love was not used for that purpose, but now we lots of love to food, right? And even more, it's like the descriptions are very, very like sensual, like apple tarty, ice cream, pastry, caramelly thing was just orgasmic. Right, lots of descriptions like this in social media. And also what is interesting here, that if people don't get a really good experience while having food, then this grief suddenly becomes collective. So the pleasure is individual, but the grief collective. So like, for example, we wanted that cupcake so badly, but we were told to wait, so. Yeah, these kind of things, it's important to know when you are analyzing the language, so what exactly is happening. And also here, tribute to Ukraine, Odessa National Academy, they also have really, really great researcher, Katerina, and she has done really amazing kind of analysis of menus, or how menus impact the choices. And also she's writing that recently restaurateurs have stopped using the names of dishes like fantasy salad or forest glade, and then they are more kind of specific in describing a dish, and what she says that words have a huge impact on the choice of food. So we first eat the words and only then we eat the food. So this is very important, because just by changing the name of the food, or just by changing the description, you can change the whole image and even the choice of the food. So if you want the people to shift towards other foods than they eat right now, probably you first have to work with the language of food. And yeah, that's where also, that was already somewhere here mentioned, that reading the descriptions of the dish, the guest must experience certain emotions and imagine it. The tastier the description is, the more likely it is that the guest will choose this particular dish. And also there is a suggestion of the list of this texture of products, how to describe. So be more eloquent in your description, because how you describe is important. And also she suggests that the pun method is also interesting, like apple ketchup or orange tartar or beetroot carpaccio. So that's what Katerina has researched. It's an interesting read. So again, the power of metaphors. Here we are, and if we look also at the wine kind of descriptions, we can see that most of the wines are broad-shouldered, seductive, masculine. So it's like specific metaphors are used to describe a food item. And yeah, here you can read these examples. One thing is this wine reviews, and I suggest you reading this Adriana Slerer's kind of research of the wine review. I would say even poetry, how it has changed from 75 to 2000. She did this research. And other kind of metaphors that are always, you might have noticed in some kind of descriptions, it's mother, grandmother, and other kind of specific or authentic kind of touch to the food. And all of this is important to create these metaphors, just to kind of imagine, remember, and kind of create already this image of the food that you will be ready to order it and to eat it. And there's another book, Beyond the Food Court, and in Latvia we have researchers who work with gastropoetry. So it's the whole already specific field where to dig into. You can look also at how food is explained in literature, and these authors of the book are saying that they were recalling how Hemingway discussed food, and when he just describes these wonderfully simple French dishes, like French, so authenticity, right? And also Charles Spence also once more kind of mentions that give it an ethnic label, such as Italian name, and people will rate the food as more authentic, or a label directs person's attention towards a feature in dish. And so you focus on specific feature in the dish. So you don't have to really judge all the dish. So if there is this, I don't know, apple ketchup, you will probably focus on that. And then the rest can be whatever. And, well, yeah, like this. And there is even, if we look even dig deeper into this language of food, there is even this from language to sound symbolism. And sound symbolism can be considered like one of the elements of product design and successful brand strategy. And what is this sound symbolism? And here you can see these two kind of very classical example. It's Bubba and Kiki. Which do you think is Bubba and which is Kiki? Yes, Kiki is a sharp and Bubba is this one. That's good. Yeah, so that's why also all your chocolates are not very, how to say, crystallic. They are rather with round shape, because, well, that's not a sound symbolism, but also how they are called, like Milky, something Milky Way, or, you know, something very soft and rounded. And then this is Kiki. Yeah, and sound symbolism is also very important. So these rounded sounding names better match with sweet tasting food. So rounded sounding, you can just imagine. So there is no like cake, like, I don't know, it's a sharp name. It's rather this something soft, rounded. Yet another aspect to think about when we think about language of food. So we have, I always had to stop myself somewhere because you can go into each of the topic very deep, but I think let's move on. So health versus pleasure. So marvelous metaphors used for describing comfort foods, more rational, pragmatic arguments for healthy choices. But maybe that should change. Maybe you should talk more about healthy choices also from the perspective of pleasure and hedonistic experience. Words and language has tremendous impact on food choices. This is unused potential to nudge for more healthy lifestyles and need to pay attention to metaphors. Words how food is described and even sound symbolism. So when we did our research with Matīs, we didn't really did this study of metaphors, but we should have done it, or maybe we will do it in the future, most likely we'll do it, because also when in certain cultures we use certain names for, like food is used as a metaphor. Like in Latvia, that's potatoes. Potatoes is like a person who is not too smart. So, you know, we have to take it out of the language corpus when we do analysis. Otherwise, we can just conclude lots of nice conclusions that people like potatoes here a lot in certain kind of scandalic events or something like that. So, always this metaphorical aspect has to be taken into account. And now to the global challenges. So as we had here already also some mentions that things are changing, people try to eat more healthy food. What is exactly more healthy? What is better for planet and environment? And why this all matters and why we actually need this food computing and why we need to work with food. It's of course an interesting topic, but it's also a topic which needs a change. And the food systems place quite a pressure on the planetary health. So 1/3 of the CO2, of the total CO2 emissions come from food sector. So agriculture and land use activities is 71%, food supply chain is 29%. So the most come from the land use rate. Land use, water use, and then there is a transportation or there's all this supply chain. Not just this, but also 40% in developed countries or rich countries, and Latvia is close to this number as well. 40% of food is wasted, and the waste happens at the household level. And meanwhile, if we look at the health, then it's also the obesity pandemic and type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular diseases. So in a way, we are living in modernity where things should have been better and more efficient. But instead of that, the food systems are inefficient and they cause harm to humans and they cause harm to the environment to a quite large extent. And also, this is a picture of the heat waves, but the heat waves have a very direct link to agriculture and land use practices, and it has a very direct link to what we actually eat or what we choose to eat. And that's why one of the things where also food computing can work with is the big climate database. It's created in Denmark. It is the first really overarching database that lists all of the food items and calculates its CO2 impact. And it's unique, it's freely to use, and everybody can work with it. And this is just some category. It's not very easy to see, but yeah, the meat products are, of course, one of the biggest CO2 creators. And also, this is a very recent article as response, I think, to the heat waves by BBC. This analysis was done that eating less meat would be like taking 8 million cars off the road, which is quite a lot. And eating meat creates more greenhouse gases and also uses lots of land. So there is a research at the Oxford University that has finally kind of calculated exact impact of what meat has on the meat consumption has on the planetary health. And then there is vegan, vegetarian, fish, slow meat, well, yeah. And also more water consumption. So very fundamental things, land, water, and air, and how this is impacted by specific diets. Yeah, so this research was about UK and was also targeted to UK consumers. It was also somewhat, it was kind of saying that you don't need to completely eradicate the meat from your diet, but you should decrease the meat consumption, and that it causes the environmental footprint, but also health aspects. And then in response, there was that people should make their own decisions around the food they eat. So it's my body, my choice, and it's kind of thinking, and this all creates very interesting kind of dispute because we will definitely talk more about these topics. I mean, we are here in this heat wave situation. And policy kind of makers are trying to kind of offer these solutions to more environmentally friendly kind of food systems, and then it's also very difficult for society. It creates lots of kind of turbulence. It's also very political. How the meat eating is also a very politicized topic. It's not a neutral, it's not just a neutral food choice. And then from the language of food perspective, it's interesting. So let's imagine that more and more alternative protein-based food items are popping up in the market. And then how do we call them? What's the name of it? So what will be the language of food around these new foods? One of the research shows that the use of meat-related terminology on labels of vegetarian products is politically controversial. So once more, that's a very political topic. And it has been banned in several countries. At the same time, it turns out that it works for consumers. That not using meat-related labels on vegetarian dishes is likely decreases the appeal of meat alternatives. So, pros and cons, lots of interesting things. And I would say there's even like language of food wars between these meat producers and plant-based protein producers. So here is a meat producer who says, I have big issues with meat substitutes, not because they are substitutes, because they are using meat denominators to sell their products better. So they use the meat denominators. Or I don't have problem with the fact that plant-based businesses are trying to sell their products, as long as they use wording that is representative of the product. The fact that they are using our names, whereas the legal domination also requires us to do additional analysis and assessment to demonstrate conformity. But oat juice is just oat juice, and if you start calling it oat milk, all of a sudden people think it's something that can replace milk. In the end, it's just a plant juice. It's a misleading element. So it's an interesting discussion, right? And it's interesting that it seems like meat producers own certain words, while other like plant-based protein producers don't own these words. So it's an interesting discussion, and it's how important, but also it kind of illustrates how important the words are in describing what we eat. So if that's oat milk, that we all call it oat milk, or it's an oat juice that you pour to your coffee, it's a big difference, right? You want to add oat milk to your coffee rather than the oat juice. And that's why also the Oatly, it sounds like milky, right? So that if you remember the food symbolism. And here's a bit more like even this conflicts illustrated that there was even a vote for European Parliament to vote, like you cannot use the same words as the meat industry uses. But in the end, they didn't vote. There is no ban. But for example, in Turkey, the government banned the production of vegan cheese alternatives this year or things like that. So there is quite a turbulence is happening. Or South Africa announces plans to prohibit terminology, right? Or plant-based meatballs. This terminology will be prohibited in South Africa. So it's really a dispute of language, how to call the new foods, how to call the new things that we should be consuming more, and then it's very political and very kind of lobby intensive. And what we did with Mattis, we also wanted to see, so what is the sentiment of meat at the Latvian Twitter corpus? Is it positive, negative? Is it changing? Is there some kind of dynamics? And we saw that there is lots of neutral tweets about meat, and that we explained that it's just like lunch offers. Just like today you can have this and this, it's like almost like bot created some kind of general information. Then there are some negative sentiments are rising, but positive are still a lot. But then you can also see here that there was more positive. This is a general Twitter kind of, this is a general Twitter view that it used to be a positive and then it became more like a complaint book. But yeah, about meat we could see this, and there is not that much discussion about meat, and there is even less discussion about alternative proteins. So we couldn't really include them in our analysis because there is very, very little about that. So people don't yet really tweet about these new lifestyles or anything like that. Maybe they're not in Twitter simply. And yeah, so here we could also see, but the neutral sentiments dominate, and then there are some positive and also negative sentiments about meat. So if we want to summarize these global challenges, then they are very serious. They affect human health, planetary health, and they are extremely political. But we will see some kind of disputes and change, and the change probably is already happening. And from the social media, from analyzing how people talk about food, we can already kind of deduct this change. And of course, it's not just the language. We could also analyze cartoons or pictures or anything like that. And I thought this picture was just funny because Papa, he kind of promoted a healthy lifestyle with this how it's beep in his mouth, right? So while smoking, he was eating something healthy. So I thought, well, that was some years ago, but yeah, it was funny. How our kind of understanding of what is healthy is changing, and how much misinformation and disinformation is also present, and that we as researchers have to take it into account and analyze it. And now we have come to the second part of my lecture. It's food computing, and how maybe you can also improve your skills in this summer school, and what can you do with these kind of overarching big issues in food or any other kind of aspect that you want to analyze. And food computing is a scientific discipline that applies computational approaches for acquiring and analyzing heterogeneous food data from disparate sources. That's a very simple, very short definition, and how it grew. It just grew out of the fact that we have so much data about food. We have cooking videos, food images, food logs, recipes, menus, food blogs, nutritional tables. Also, all these databases that I showed you, that's all data sets of food. And these data sets of food are growing and growing. And we are not doing too much or there is not enough of analytics. So the team of food computing scientists kind of came together, and a survey of food computing, that's like, I would say, the Bible, current Bible of food computing, and they kind of establish this structure of what it is and what can it do. So it says, first of all, it can acquire lots of data from different sources, and then it can do the analysis through computer vision, machine learning, data mining. And then the tasks, according to the food computing kind of founders, the tasks are perception, recognition, food recognition from the picture, let's say, retrieval, recommendation system, which means that, well, we all live in a constant recommendation systems, right? So whatever we do, it's analyzed and later recommended to us. So it's recommendation and prediction monitoring, something like what you do with your life, how healthy you are, etc., etc. And then the applications are health, culture, agriculture, medicine, and biology. So it's also a very, very wide topic from the application and opportunities perspective. And then I will a little bit look into this kind of perspective from the computer scientists. So here is food images, recipes, all of this, and this is called big data. And then the big data, it means something that that's constantly created. It comes in, and then you have to kind of work with it from like live analytics. And it's not so easy to work with big data. Not so many scientists actually work with big data because they are also fragmented. They are not that generalizable. Because now when we talk about anyone who posts anything in social media, we talk about a wealthy person with an income, with a phone, with a connection. And there is quite a large part of society which is not there. So it's always problematic still, this big data analytics. So you understand that you analyze just part of society, not everybody. And also with GDPR, you are not always really, you cannot have specifics in demographics or anything else. So you have data, but you don't know much about this data, and then what do you do with it? It's not that well understood, but that's a field where you can all grow as researchers. And still, there was great expectations for this big data. It seemed like we can get data for anything. We can also analyze what people eat more in sunny or rainy days, and that's also what we did with Matīs, or at least what they tweet about. And there are differences what the people tweet about. Probably you would tweet more about hot chocolate and tea when it's raining, or and when it was windy, people tweeted more about meat, actually. But anyhow, you can get all sorts of very detailed data, but it's quite difficult to kind of put it all together and come up with solutions. So this is why there is still these great expectations for big data analytics, but not that much examples, I would say. But this is how the future might look like. This is the food computing with that Professor Ramesh Jain is doing. He is focusing on human health and how food computing can help humans to remain more healthy. So what is trying to look at all sorts of issues of psychology, weather, environment. There is even a study that looks at, from the photographies of the plate that you eat, you can deduct something about your mental health state, and all sorts of very, very interesting kind of aspects that you can do when you have data and knowledge how to analyze them. And so the future of food computing will definitely be more into this personalization that Ramesh Jain is working with. It's the World Food Atlas that would include everything about food. Like we navigate now with Google Maps, you could navigate as well in the food systems, because currently it's not that easy to navigate there. You don't know the CO2 impact of your food and many other things that you might want to know or in the future will be necessary to know. And also you could systematize the global data in the food knowledge graph. Food knowledge graph, that's also very important because there is so much of misinformation and disinformation of the food. So you need to somehow balance out, and with computer science, with some kind of this knowledge graph formation, you can probably detect what is the false statements about food and create some kind of more reliable and trustful food knowledge graph. And then, of course, also there will be growing this virtual reality experiences and how that will impact our lives, and also this cross-sectorality and multidisciplinarity will be necessary there because food is such a very complex topic where just the computer science methods don't really. It's not enough to be able to analyze the data. You have to know everything what you want to analyze about the metaphors, about the language, about the culture, about the societies, how they interact, and about the political lobbyism. So you need to include all of this if you want to have really good analysis. And just to end, there is also a food computing manifesto I thought might be interesting for you. There is a group of researchers who came together and they thought that we want to work with these technologists, innovators in computing community, designing the food systems of the future. And their kind of main principles is make the invisible visible, to enable learning and ensure transparency, develop for fairness in algorithms, another big discussion in today. So how we control, how we see all the algorithms that recommend different types of food to us. Design for multisensorial experiences to remind people about their full human capabilities. So this is more like a reference that we are very much stick to our screens, and the other senses are left a bit in the periphery, but that we should come back to all of the sense usage. And allow for creative personalization, creative problem solving with technology, and account for changes over time and everyday life through intelligent adaptation. And so basically open, transparent, and sharing kind of research collaboration, because also when it comes to food and food data, of course, we don't have much data. We have social networks, but the retailers' sales data remain not open to us to analyze. So the future of food computing, in-depth understanding of the language of food, context of global challenges, availability of data that I just mentioned. There are so much data that are still not available, and we could, if we would have access to that, we could really have more interesting insights and maybe also nudge people differently from this public policy perspective. Ethical usage of data and algorithms when it comes to food, especially because it's, as I mentioned, its health and also environmental impact is enormous. And accessibility of solutions provided by food computing, that's already next step, next challenge. What if you, through the food computing, you know exactly what you should eat, but it's not accessible to you? And then you have the solution, but you don't have the solution, and that's also problematic. That's somewhat, I think, similar as with skin cancer detection. We can move forward very quickly with this computer vision, but then when it comes to actually operating people, there are too few hospitals. And this is probably similar to food systems, because while there is the food waste, there is, of course, also undernutrition in all of the countries in the world. And trust and collaboration across the disciplines. And I think with this I will end, and that I wish all of you to create this trust and create this collaboration, and also have fun. And I hope that in a couple of years I will be also maybe participant and listening to one of you with your lecture. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Maija, but we are not saying goodbyes just yet. So first of all, I will turn to the audience. Do you have a question to ask? Definitely, I have usually a lot of questions to Maija, but first to you. raise your hand if you have a question. Yes. So Dagnia was first time noticed. Okay.
I don't have question, more like commentary. I'm a person who use like Twitter every day. I'm a person with Twitter addiction, I would say. But I have seen that in Twitter there is more heated climate debates than positive feedback about nature-friendly food consumption. Like people are more like fighting, and they are like more about the politics of climate. But the general positive, I don't know, example there is missing. I think that it is in more other forms of media, for example, on Instagram or maybe, I don't know, other places.
Yeah, well, also we discovered that Twitter is becoming more and more negative sentiment kind of platform. It used to be just like positive, some kind of, and now it's like negative. Negativity is growing. That's the case. When it comes to food, yeah, I think of course there is this discussion about climate change, this fight, but if you look at the everyday, I don't know, tweeters who tweet about food just randomly, then we don't see yet that the food is there is knowledge that the food systems impact this climate change.
Mm-hmm.
So this is also what we discovered, that there is not that much of this discussion or new kind of ideas that would be built around food or on individual kind of choices. Yeah. Yes. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Maija, for an interesting lecture. And I listened partly online and partly now joining it. But you mentioned a couple of times the notion of nudges. Mm-hmm. And I think it's very curious currently when we are talking about digital humanities, which in a way analyze data retrospectively. But nudges is something we turn with a foresight. Mm-hmm. So maybe you have any kind of ideas of how to proceed with these nudges. What would be your proposals, or maybe you have already some good examples in your mind?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one of the things that I think where we should nudge that these descriptions of healthy food, they could be done very differently, just by really not just emphasize this pragmatic, because humans are more like hedonistic creatures. So one of the things that also in these public campaigns where you try to say, eat this vegetable, they are your superheroes because of the health, maybe instead you should rather look into the option to say, well, this is totally tasty. Yeah, this is tasty, you will just love it. You will, you have to emphasize this taste aspect of whatever you want to emphasize. You want the kids eat more veggies, then you cannot just say it's good for you, because it has to be very tasty, and maybe it also has to be crunchy. So you have to figure out something like that also. So there is this knowledge, but it's not used because people don't just choose food rationally. It's a very complex process, so it can be impacted by everything, including the weather outside. So, but this taste and pleasure aspect for healthy and foods that you want to nudge society to eat more, it should be emphasized, because also it's much more just these corrective aspects, like don't eat, this will lead to cardiovascular diseases, or don't eat that, or don't eat that. And also our nutritionologist and Professor Laila Maija, she also recently mentioned in media that people should rather think what they can eat good rather than that they should abstain from. So that maybe this kind of shift in thinking should happen. So you can eat something good, you don't have to just refrain from everything. So there are these things that we could nudge, and the knowledge is out there somewhat, but it's not really used. Yeah, but it would be also interesting to look at this retrospectively, what kind of nudges have been working. And this Popeyes movie with spinach definitely worked. I mean, spinach was a hype food for a long time. And even when they discovered that this was just a wrong measurement of this iron level in spinach, right? People still think it's like, wow, spinach is more special than the other food. And there are hype foods now and then that we can explore. So it's also, yeah, question what has nudged these kind of hypes in the past.
Continuing the same thought about nudges, do you think that everyday people joining TikTok, Instagram, YouTube with their own recipes and experiences with food can help with these nudges and share their experience with others and encourage them to change something about their food consumption?
Absolutely, because like as I mentioned, we were trying with, to understand what is healthy food, what is not healthy food, and it was very difficult from the recipes or whatsoever. And then reading all these articles that also struggle with the same, we realized that maybe a very simple kind of calculation can be done there, that what the food that you cook is a healthy food, because you cook it at home, you use like ingredients you know, and then the, let's say, fast food restaurants is not a healthy choice. So whoever cooks, and these cooking videos are rising and shares, I think it has it definitely has power, and this is changing lifestyle also. I mean, also pandemic impacted it. People started to cook more, and then also the food inflation, which means that you just have to eat at home. So all of this is changing, and I also, like from my personal perspective, of course, I see more and more these healthy and plant-based interesting meals prepared and shared, and absolutely there is enormous potential for that, and influence is quite massive compared also to just the public campaigns. I mean, that's where the actual campaigns happen, right?
Okay, thank you very much about presentation. I have a question about these positive and negative connotations in Twitter. What was the methodology, how you detect these positive, negative, and there is also, Twitter is famous with these satirical or ironical tweets, and how it could be detected, or because visual material and textual material could be have this dissonance, and how it could be analyzed.
That's a very, very good question, and we were really struggling. So with this sentiment, so there was a human evaluators who evaluated according to positive, negative, and neutral. And you know, there was really, really difficult to evaluate these ironic or sarcastic tweets. Are they positive? Are they negative? They're definitely not neutral. But we describe it more in this upcoming DHNB publication, where this article will be published. But then it was like humans who read and marked the sentiment, and then there's machine learning kind of based this sentiment evaluation. And eventually also there was not such a high agreement about among humans. So there was difficulties, and we were thinking that probably we have to expand this sentiment to having this ironic and sarcastic, because just positive, negative, neutral is very difficult. That probably we need to add some more emotions so that you can be more gradual. Because as you mentioned rightly, with this, some evaluators were marking it as positive sentiment, something ironic, some were marking it as negative, and then there was this disagreement, but then some kind of compromise was found there, but it was difficult, yeah.
But generally it was linguistically based.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for our presentation. Food discourse topic is very near and dear to me, so I'm very happy to have heard your lecture. I also have a more kind of technical question. I'm very sorry if my coffee and sleep-deprived brain skipped information about the data set. So I was wondering how large your data set was. I'm very impressed that you were analyzing Twitter. I'm coming from Lithuania, so in Lithuania, Twitter is something that's not really popular, at least for things like food. It's more for politics or some other stuff. So how large was your data set? And then you mentioned that you were looking at how Latvians talk about food. So was it just tweets in the Latvian language? Because in your population, you have a very large part of people who may not speak Latvian, but their citizenship is Latvian. So, thank you.
Well, actually, I was planning to include these also exact numbers in my presentation, but did not. Maybe I can add before sending again to Anda. So it's a 10 years long compilation of 2.7 million tweets. I'm trying to remember exact numbers, I have them. It's in all of the articles with Matis, we describe it. And it's in Latvian language, tweets in Latvian language. And it's quite impressive. It's quite a big amount of data. And maybe I can find exact numbers, but I think if you would do the same in Lithuanian language, now you are saying that Twitter is for politics, but you might find a lot of food-related data, and I would suggest I can link you up with Matis, probably he can suggest already how to deal with, how to make such kind of food-related data corpus that you can analyze. And I think that's quite an amazing resource that each of our countries can make, because usually also in my work I was also analyzing lots of English Twitter data, but it definitely you can have much more scrupulous analysis of other languages, and then you can but I think there might be a problem because Twitter is changing its policies, so it was possible. But now there are already some kind of changes in the policies, how you can actually collect the data. So, there might be some issues there as well when you want to kind of compile this data. But I will link you with Matis, or if you want to make such kind of data corpus in Lithuania. And then you can also see more exact details of this language data that we were analyzing.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see whether Twitter with the bird logo was more inspiring for talking about the food compared to X Twitter.
Just comment and question. Maybe I will put in Zoom later. There is a website of Matis.
Yes, exactly. Thanks, Inga.
Twitter ēdiens lielākie LV, which is in Latvian, but also with link to machine translation, so you can translate and look at it. But question is more related to your presentation. So since it's a digital humanities school and we are here to learn and share our experience, I would like to learn whether code and data of your research is available and how, and maybe we can try it in one of seminars today or later.
Yeah, it is available in GitHub, and I can also send the links. Yeah, not now, but yeah, I will then probably send it to you. Yeah, that's a good idea that you could maybe play a little bit around. Yeah, continue the work. Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah, thanks. Thanks. I will also put it then later.
Hello, thank you for your presentation. This was one of the reasons I even applied for this summer school. It's fascinating. I have a background in anthropology, and a big thing for our research is consent and informed consent. So my question is, how did you go about that when collecting data from social media? What about consent, ethics, things like that?
Very good question. So, but if you post something publicly, it means that you kind of are fine with this public perspective. And also, we didn't dig deeper into the who did it. So we don't have actually demographic data of this the tweeters who tweet about food. So we maybe know the location, if they kind of were explicit about the location where they tweeted about it. Of course, we know the language, and that's pretty much it. So there we didn't have to work with this consent, but all in all, consent is a very big topic in food computing, because there this food and health perspectives come in. So there is lots of also interesting publications of how you should approach this if you work with or research people, and if you can then trace something related to their kind of habits, food consumption or health that is not necessarily made public, then you have to be very, very careful. And this is also definitely one of the kind of barriers why not that much of research is done, because it's very, very sensitive. So you basically need a lawyer on your team when you do the research. And that's often the case in these big international research author collectives, that you need basically someone with this legal knowledge who would really say that your data were collected in a right manner in GDPR. Is there, and you cannot trace back specific human person's health status, for example. Yeah.
Thank you very much about the presentation, and I had a question related to the Latvian identity. So did you find anything specific about how Latvians perceive and describe food, or is it more or less the generalities that you mentioned? Or maybe there are some colors or shapes, because Latvian food is quite different from French or Italian food. So did you find any differences there?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Also, we were thinking about these comparisons more, but we definitely found seasonality that is specific to Latvian, like cold soup was really trending in summers. And yeah, so we basically found out that there is this seasonality is there, and it's still strong. So the people would eat this tangerines in certain period of time, and grey peas, and then the cold soup, and yeah. So I would say that this was mainly that we could also trace this seasonality, like this seasonality or this specific rituals around specific foods. But there is definitely more that we can do to look into the how people talk about food. But first, we definitely need to also sort out these metaphors about food, or, you know, these kind of things, and then we can do it.
Okay, more hands.
You already mentioned about representativity, about digital literacy, and about wealth related to Twitter users. I would like you to expand a bit more on it if you can. So what do you think is missed about Latvian food identity? What is not included in Twitter data? Have you some ideas or even findings? And another question would be, you mostly talk about Twitter data as some average users, but there might be actually very different kind of users, like maybe some average, and then there may be some influencers or some writers who are really driving the discourse. Did you also look at it in this perspective?
Yeah, we did normalize the data, so if there was just one tweet that was retweeted many times, then we took it as a one tweet. But there is definitely we could analyze more these influencers and this is, but this is maybe somewhat different kind of approach to analysis. Also, we did not explicitly look at what is not included in Twitter, but we just intuitively understood that this is this maybe wealthy and urban part of society, or a specific age group. So it would be interesting to know what's left outside this social media, and look at the questions that are discussed there, how much they resonate. Like in the analog lives without these social networks. That would be interesting, but then we could probably look more, and we could do this analysis of, also Anda, you suggested to me after this conference that look more also to do this media analysis, or what's then through other media, not the social media, but like state media, what's shown there, because it's also full of food-related kind of stories, food-related discourses, and then we could look how this differs from the social media kind of discussion. That would be quite interesting as well. Yeah. So there's lots of things to do.
So anyone? So really, I can ask my own question. Actually, I already asked this question to Maija, and maybe this will be formulated as a comment part question. So this is true that consumption of food is extremely personal thing. At the same time, we're talking more and more about how it influences the society as a whole, the budget of the medicine, or even the climate change. And so are you seeing this, that the data becomes a foundation of policy decisions to some extent, and should the policies direct the consumption of food in some way, or is this too intrusive even?
That's $1 million question. Well, I mean, it's very tricky, and what we see that the politicians don't want to direct you when it comes to your food choices, because you can become very unpopular with that. So there is, in general, I would say, very kind of food is no-go area for policymakers. So you don't really see very clear messages. Right now, after this heat wave, you can see some kind of articles which in UK, that kind of publish this is linked, and this is how we came to these heat waves, and this is the food system fault, or things like that. But all in all, also even in this article, it was said that you don't have to really refuse completely from the meat, and it's very sensitive. It is very personal, and I think that rather from this kind of what you should not do, as we discussed there, that maybe you should rather kind of nudge what you can do, what is this good thing that you can do, or the right kind of choice for you. And that probably has more potential, because I think it's not just from the politician's perspective that it's difficult, and it's also already a very politicized topic. If you read about this climate change, then you can always see that there is meat lobbies on one side, and then the alternative proteins on the other side. On the other hand, then the countries are more and more investing into this plant-based food kind of item alternatives. It's still a discourse that grows on its own, but I think it will. Currently, I don't see that, even if it's so very kind of obvious, I don't see that there will be a very much shift in how politicians will address this kind of issue. No, it will remain the human freedom to choose.
Certainly, we do not want to be regulated by the government or artificial intelligence or anyone else. So, last question: do you have something to add or maybe comment? If not, then we are ending the today's stream and just stay for a couple of minutes to talk about some practical issues. And I say thank you to Maija and give her another round of applause, please.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Sandra. Yeah.